Let's now discuss the next two hypotheses, the natural order and the input hypothesis. The natural order hypothesis argues that the acquisition follows a natural order, that grammatical structures occurs in a predictable sequence. So there is a natural order that the acquisition process follows. For example, the learners of English as a second language acquire the grammatical structure of yes and no questions before they acquire the grammatical structure of WH questions. Although similar, the order of acquisition in first language is often different from what happens in the second language acquisition. The order of acquisition remains the same regardless in the second language, regardless of explicit instruction. In other words, explicit teaching and learning cannot change the natural order of acquisition. So, the child acquires the grammatical structure or the process naturally. Despite he or she is given explicit teaching, the order remains the same. Now, let's see, it's a very interesting example. So, the teacher says, okay class, repeat after me. I am going to the store today. Everybody, children repeat. I am going to the store today. Going to the store today. So she feels that they are learning. Excellent. So repeating after the teacher, following the instructional guidelines, the instruction of grammatical rules, they are following it exactly the same order that has been provided by the teacher. At home, the child says, Mama, Papa, I go store. So basically, that is the natural order that she is acquiring. She is not aware of the forms at the moment, and it is through the interaction that she would acquire the other forms. But here, despite the fact the teacher provides the instructional grammatical rules, the order of acquiring here remains the same. Kreshn claims learning in predictable way occurs both in first language as well as in the second language. If the acquirers are given input, they can comprehend and are not under pressure. So basically, the idea is the understanding of the input, and that input which the acquirer understands easily. To him or her, it is a meaningful input. In first language, vowel sounds are recognized in the early childhood, followed by the consonant sounds. So that is the order. Burt and Dewey and Kreshn conducted studies on natural order of acquisition and concluded that most children and adults follow a similar sequence in the acquisition of grammatical morphemes. For example, the ing form is acquired before the past form of ed. So they conducted the study and they came up with this conclusion that the adults, they follow the same acquisition in terms of acquiring the grammatical morphemes. This is the ing form which is acquired before the ed form is acquired. Kreshen's theory of input hypothesis claims that second language acquisition occurs when the acquirer understands the input. The whole emphasis is on the input, and Kreshen termed this kind of input as comprehensible input. That input which is slightly beyond the current level of competence of language learners. So this is comprehensible input, meaningful input, and which is beyond the level of the existing knowledge of the language the acquirer has. The hypothesis states I plus 1, where I stands for interlanguage, the acquirer or the learner has based on the understanding of the grammatical rules of his or her mother tongue, and moving towards the acquiring of the target language, he or she comes up with the interlanguage, moving to the next stage where he or she is moving to the target language understanding. The next stage is plus 1. So that is what is called comprehensible input based on I plus 1. Now, according to number of researchers, the idea of comprehensible input states, if the input hypothesis is correct, the language learning classroom must focus on presenting students within context comprehensible input in verbal and written form. So basically, this is the task of the teacher, that in the classroom environment, the students must be presented with the comprehensible input in the form of verbal and written forms. According to Freeman and Diaz-Rico and Weed, the teacher provides this input by speaking more slowly, using shorter, well-formed sentences with restricted vocabulary, concentrating on communication. So that is how the input is given. In order to make the input meaningful to the acquirer, the process is being facilitated by the teachers by providing the information slowly, usually shorter and well-formed sentences, and sentence follows a simple sentence structure, restricted vocabulary, because the idea is to communicate and not to focus on the large data of words, pictures and gestures, kinesthetic and hands-on activities where you require the physical movements, games, and the activities where the feedback is also given to the learner. Generally, not all students in classroom will be at the same level of proficiency. But if the input is varied so that some part of it is comprehensible to each student, the student will acquire that part. Some of the techniques for comprehensible input include, especially in the classroom setting, using of the expressions and body language, because these supplement your input. Provide thinking time. The process needs to be at a very slow pace. Pauses between phrases, so the acquirer should be able to absorb the information. The sentences should be short and the simple sentence structure should be followed. Stress high frequency words. So it's not the quantity of the word or database, it's just the type of words which are of high frequency should be emphasized. Repeat and review vocabulary to see or check the relevancy. Repeat and restate or rephrase to facilitate the understanding. And the teacher needs to be, all the agents which are involved need to be supportive to the learner. To conclude, Kreshens's natural order hypothesis claims that we acquire the grammatical rules in a predictable natural order, and some are acquired earlier than the others. The input hypothesis refers to the idea of comprehensible input, which claims that we acquire the target language only when we understand it.